Welcome back. It's been just over 2 years since the social networking tool Twitter arrived on mobile phones and computer screens around the world. Twitter came with an unusual warning, an admission really from its inventors that even they didn't know what it was for. 2 years later, Twitter, which should be just a technological toddler, is experiencing explosive growth, a record 1,300% increase in just 1 month. It's now second only to Facebook in the social networking sweepstakes. Twitter's also challenging the news media in its ability to break news stories quickly, giving citizen reporting a nifty new name, crowdsourcing journalism. The Listening Post's Salah Qadar now on Twitter's challenge to the mainstream media.
Forget blogging and MySpace. If you really want to stay connected, there is a new service, and supposedly it is the next big thing.
Fire, the English language, the airplane, three of the most important inventions in American history. And now, joining, if not surpassing them, is the online sensation known as Twitter.
Twitter is very quickly becoming the world's real-time search leader. There's no doubt about it.
Ryan from Toronto is watching our show right now. He just sent us this tweet. Take a look at what he writes after watching part of our discussion about Pakistan and Afghanistan.
The media is always looking for the next big thing, and at the moment, I guess the consensus is that Twitter could be it, but nobody really knows.
Twitter promises users the chance to be hyper-connected. But hyper-connected to what? Some celebrities have more than 1 million people following their short online postings or tweets. CNN also has 1 million followers, and other mainstream media don't want to be left behind.
Just imagine what it's like to have the audience of 1 million people reading what you say online. Compare that to a newspaper audience. That's a lot of people that you can mobilise.
The UK's Sky News even has its own Twitter correspondent.
So why did we make a bold statement and employ a Twitter correspondent? Because it's the flavour of the month, and to ignore it would be stupid.
Thanks to Twitter, it's possible to share short, bite-sized updates about your life and follow the updates of people that matter to you via the web.
I think what's amazing about Twitter is it just says, look, 140 characters. Use it how you want to use it.
The little messages from Twitter painted a picture of her friends, family, and co-workers that she'd never seen before. It was the real world.
The chance to tell people what you're thinking, feeling, and seeing in those 140 characters is proving very popular. The number of people using Twitter has risen from 2 million to 20 million in just 1 year. And with so many people posting messages all the time, it's not surprising that sometimes Twitter gets to the news stories first.
During last year's attacks in Mumbai, India, Twitter showed it can be a useful source of information.
Where Twitter played a really important role was in the international context. For the first 6 hours or so, the coverage of the terrorist attack on international news channels was patchy at best. Even after that, international news channels were struggling to find context on the Mumbai terrorist attack. And for international audiences, I think Twitter became a really important source of news.
But Twitter can also be a source of misinformation.
When mainstream media relies on citizen media as a source of news, then you need to be really careful, because one misquoted incident and everybody starts quoting the mainstream media, which quoted an unsubstantiated citizen media source.
Twitter was also the home of countless rumours about the H1N1 virus, also known as swine flu, rumours that proved unfounded.
New media works off the same principles as swine flu. It's a pandemic form of media, has no centre, it's intensely viral, moves very fast, and that's how information has been distributed in the Twitter age. One of the consequences of all this information flowing around like a virus, like a pandemic, is it's very hard to know what's true and what isn't.
Lance Armstrong fell off his bike while racing in Europe recently, broke his collarbone. You saw it on Twitter within 45 seconds of it happening. You didn't actually see it on Google News for another hour. So it's been amazing to see how, when you're really crowdsourcing journalism like that, you get basic facts really quickly. Later, when you want the full story on what happened to Lance, what the prognosis is, that's a place where professional journalists still and will continue to add a lot of weight and add a lot of value.
Hundreds of kids, women's and children's have been brought to this hospital for medical treatment.
Sometimes the people who replace journalists, citizen journalists, are all we have to rely on. When Israel prevented the world's media from entering Gaza during its offensive in January of this year, Gazans filled in the gaps by using Twitter. That's a role for Twitter that could be set to grow.
There's some countries in the world where you know, you look for the Twitter conversation and it's not there because the infrastructure for mobile phones and 3G hasn't been set up, or power supplies for computers is erratic. Zimbabwe is the country where if you could get a regular Twitter feed set up there, that would just liberate internally. It would bring the story to the wider world.
When a commercial jet crash-landed in the middle of one of the world's centres for mainstream media, it was Twitter that carried the story first. A victory for new media this time, but can we rely on Twitter in the future? A recent study claimed that 90% of tweets are made by only 10% of users.
Is Twitter the hottest thing going and here to stay, or is it just a flash in the pan? It doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of middle ground on this one. Either you're on board or you just don't get it.
Look, Twitter is not a newspaper. The idea that Twitter has some sort of responsibility towards reporting the news is unfair on Twitter. Twitter has no editors, and the guys who have invented Twitter didn't claim that it would replace media. Twitter is simply a viral instant messaging network for millions of people around the world.
I believe that now, from this point onwards, every time there's a news story breaking out in any reasonably connected city in the world, it will probably break out via a mobile phone, either on Twitter in the form of a text message, or on YouTube in the form of a video, or on Flickr in the form of a photograph, or a service like that. And I think we should assume that this is going to happen from here on, and reserve a surprise for situations when it doesn't happen.
Reporters also weighing in this morning. I'm on Twitter, finally.
I'm talking about Twitter. This is Time magazine, and it's on the cover.
If you can't see 3 or 4 ways that Twitter's going to make money right now, you're not an entrepreneur.
The media appear more than happy to jump on the Twitter bandwagon, at least while it's free.
Why do I have to follow CNN on Twitter? If I want to follow CNN, I can follow them on CNN.
More Global Village Voices now on Twitter and the media. And of course, you can follow this story and any other stories we cover here at the Listening Post on Twitter.
Twitter makes part of a big movement of citizen media, which is the actual rival to mainstream media. As a tool to communicate, Twitter is a very powerful tool since it's quicker and it's published in real time.
We can get a bit too hung up on the idea of whether Twitter produces objective journalism. I think the point of coming to the truth through journalism is a much messier and a much wider and more complex process. We have to think of news as not so much a set of big institutions and big machines that have to be, you know, defended at the ramparts, but more of an ecosystem, more of an environment in which many different players and many different sizes of organisations and organisms are going to be contributing to the big story.
We had the first tweet from outer space. One of the members of the last shuttle crew, blast off from Cape Canaveral, actually tweeted back to Earth the message, launch was awesome. As a comedian here joked, we've gone from one small step for man, one large step for mankind, to launch was awesome. And that pretty much tells you everything you need to know. Twitter is the ultimate symbol of the dumbing down of the culture, I think, and the debasement of language.
Finally, flash mobs were one of those web and text phenomena, a mob of people showing up unannounced somewhere, turning that place into a stage for a one-off performance of some kind. Then, as quickly as they show up, they're gone, leaving a surprised audience wondering just what happened. These days, flash mobs have been turned into marketing weapons, buzz machines that are aimed at the internet to create publicity via word of mouth or mouse. This one was choreographed to publicize a new reality show in the U.S. about the life of MC Hammer. You may remember this hit of his from 1990. A flash mob hitting the Sunset Strip in L.A. is our web video of the week. We'll see you next time at The Listening Post.
You can't touch this. 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 So hard, makes me say, oh my God, thank you. Oh, blessing me, what am I doing? It's just good. You don't get down. See, no order from the ultimate unknown. And such, and this is good. You can't touch this.